Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So today we're going to continue a series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project. I'm going to do a fun video today trying to convince you as to why you want to get a CRT in 2024 for your MiSTer FPGA. Because don't get me wrong, the HDMI scaler on MiSTer is spectacular and does an incredible job of getting all those retro cores onto your modern television. But there's something nostalgic, otherworldly, and just charming about a CRT television that does so many favors for so many of the games. And you don't have to have a PVM either. I'll talk about other video options in this video, but the basic tenet of it is that I just absolutely love CRT televisions, and yes, that is my torso in the TV right there. Because there's so many different cores available, and so many of them will output RGB where the original consoles and hardware never would, having a CRT television to get that analog signal out is amazing. All the tests in this video will be done on RGBS, but you can do composite, you can do component, you can do S-video out as well. It's definitely a lot more equipment, it's a lot more wires, but in the end, I genuinely do think it is absolutely worth it. If you're on the fence about whether or not a CRT for MiSTer would be fun, I can tell you it absolutely would be. But taking a look at the CPS2 core, this is Street Fighter Alpha 3 right here. I just think these games look absolutely spectacular on a 240p television. You don't need an arcade monitor to get this effect. You can have a PVM or even a good S-video television is going to give you such a vintage retro looking image with all of those scan lines and all of the detail that you used to see back in the day in the 90s. Now I did try to match the refresh rate as best as possible, but my FX3 does not have synchro scan, so you may see a little bit of the raster line going through the image. But the clarity, the motion smoothness here, the rendering detail at 240p, this just looks absolutely incredible. And the best part is, just because you have a CRT doesn't mean you're sacrificing that much picture. You can get a 20 or 27 inch TV and you just sit a little bit closer and you get those pure 80s and 90s vibes back. Because a lot of what this is outside of the picture is that nostalgia. I grew up with this technology, I sat next to the TV, played my video games, and so much about what looks quote unquote right to us is whether or not it looks like how we remember it. But the great part is we don't just need to have that PVM with RGB in, although it does help. MiSTer Add-ons has this composite as well as S-video active adapter, which you can plug in and get that composite video signal out, or S-video, whatever you want it to look like, because some people's nostalgia remembers that composite signal, and that's what they think is right. There's so many different options as far as how to use a CRT with MiSTer. The only wrong option is not to use one. And I will say right now, these televisions can still be had relatively cheaply. This is my local Facebook marketplace. This Sony television, who knows if it works, you could always ask, is a free item. There's another Trinitron for $45. This at least has composite in. A lot of people don't seem to take a photo of the back of the TV, but you could just ask. Or something like this right here. This is a 20-inch Toshiba, and they're looking for $234, which is too high, but this is the type of thing, just offer $100, 10 times out of 10, the seller is going to take it, and you're going to have component in. Some of these TVs can even be modified for RGB, just with some wires and a new port. Let's take a look at something like Gaia Crusaders here. I absolutely love this beat 'em up. It's got great color and great background graphics, and it looks spectacular on a CRT television. I'm going to move over to a direct capture over HDMI, and you're going to see that while it does look extremely similar, it is the same game. There's a little bit of charm lost without that PVM or CRT look. Yes, we can put filters over top, aperture grill, scan lines, everything like that, or you could just sit really close to the television, have that warm glow of the CRT, and get all of that without playing around with the filters. Because as much as I do love filtration on MiSTer FPGA and in general, sometimes you just want to sit down and play a game, and the CRT television is going to give that to you because it's doing all the scan lines internally, because that's how the hardware looked. Take a look here at the shadows. They flicker in a very interesting way, and you'll see in just a moment on my CRT television just how the technology works. These shadows should not be blinking on and off like they are, but because of the refresh rate of the board and the refresh rate of my camera, you will see something like that. But on the actual television, you're going to get better shadows than you see on any other source possible. And as I take a close-up here, you can see all of the different scan lines, and you can see just how detailed this image is just for being a 240p image. There's so much detail and such a low amount of resolution. When you take a look at a CRT TV at a proper viewing distance, it's going to look absolutely spectacular. But another great thing about a CRT television, so long as it's not one of the older ones, is the aspect ratio. This is a 4:3 aspect. It is not square, although everyone seems to think they are. If you take a look at something like me running Esperati here on an actual LCD monitor, we do have the ability to rotate the screen because MiSTer knows it is on an HD signal. But if we actually rotate the monitor, you're going to still see that there's black bars at the top and the bottom, that letterboxing, because the aspect ratio is not proper. We still get a lot of image, but the great part about a CRT television is you can just turn it on its side into Tate mode. This is safe for them. It is a fun thing, and now you will see we have a completely different aspect ratio, the proper one to play something like a cave bullet hell shmup, and that is amazing. In arcades, the monitors will just be mounted 90 degrees rotated, and that's why you'll see here that refresh line is now going across the screen, not up and down. And the best part is you also have options here. You do need to turn your head to see them, but we can play around with a lot of the different adjustments, including the refresh rate, because this board would run at 57 Hertz or 57 frames per second, but we can lock it to 60 as well. The nice thing is the PVM will sync to 57 Hertz, and you'll never see this raster line because you're not using a camera, you're just looking with your eyes. So you can get the proper refresh rate onto a CRT television without potentially any of the screen tearing that would happen if you put this onto an LCD television and had to run it at that frame rate. And obviously on a TV, you're going to be watching it in 16:9 horizontal unless you have a monitor that rotates, and you're going to have the smallest screen real estate from there. Obviously, if you're on a 70-inch TV, it would still be bigger than a 20-inch PVM in Tate mode, but this was the way the game was intended to be played when it came out. In this aspect ratio on a CRT television, there's something really special to be seeing this game run that way with a CRT. The other great thing is, unlike an LCD monitor, you do not need to worry about latency on CRT. It is non-existent. And while there are a lot of great monitors out there that have sub-frame accuracy as far as the latency is concerned, it is still something you need to shop around for. I'm not saying a CRT replaces your flat panel, I'm saying it works in conjunction with it and does the same thing in a completely different way. It's like any sort of artist. A painter is going to have more than one type of brush to achieve more than one type of effect. We have CRT televisions to do the same thing with a different look, because having one of my PVMs on its side in Tate mode playing some cave bullet hell games on MiSTer FPGA is awesome. Or something like In the Hunt right here, and yes, again, there I am in the reflection. This little effect there of that radar looks so much better when you actually have the phosphors of a CRT television than when you're using it on an LCD. It just has that glow that the screen has because there are those phosphors lighting up behind the glass. It's just how that technology worked. And this again just looks so amazing on a CRT. But of course we have so many different options as well. Nintendo 64 on a CRT, getting that RGB out the back. You would have to mod your console to do this on real hardware, so MiSTer is giving you the best of both worlds, FPGA Nintendo 64 and RGB. Or something like PlayStation 1 here, Strider 2 looks incredible on CRT. All of those pseudo neon signs in the background just have a better, more accurate glow when you're dealing with the phosphors of an actual CRT television. It just looks so good, and that's the thing. You don't need to go out and buy expensive PVMs. Granted, mine were basically free or cost me like 20 bucks and a 6-pack of beer. And you can go on Facebook Marketplace and find CRT televisions for basically free wherever you are. But don't wait around, because I know people are going to get in on this even more, and those free TVs are going to disappear. Even something like Neo Geo AES, it just looks incredible with the scan lines that are produced with the actual screen technology, because all of those filters are just trying to emulate a CRT. Use a CRT and you don't need to worry about it whatsoever because it's inside of the box, pun very much intended. But I don't want you to think that I'm trying to say that if you're not using a CRT, you're not having the good experience on MiSTer FPGA. There's definitely purists out there in both directions, people that tell you if you're not using a CRT you're not doing it right, and other people that will tell you that LCD technology and scalers have eclipsed the need for a CRT. My opinion is, why not both? But that's how I always am in life. I want everything all at once. You'll see here that something like Gun for IR works incredible on MiSTer on an LCD, but we can also just use the original GunCon on a CRT television and play like we did back in the day when we were kids hanging out with our friends. There are so many different light gun options that are intended to be used on a CRT television, and generally you can find them for less than something like a GunCon 3 or a Gun for IR. something like a Japanese imported GunCon or GunCon 2 is going to be the cheapest way to play these games and use that raster sensor, and that is really nice. It saves you some money if you spent some dollars on the CRT. You will see that the GunCons do have this composite sync link right here. This basically syncs itself to the raster drop pattern for better accuracy, but the great part is MiSTer Add-ons has a couple different devices we can use. We can take full RGB and have that composite actually put into the signal so that we can get our RGB and still have our GunCon function. So many of these things have been thought about and already fixed. It allows you to play your light guns on a television. Hopefully when we get more light gun arcade cores, you'll see more use out of this stuff. That's my hope for 2024. But if you do want to go the composite route, that same adapter I showed you in the beginning, you're going to be able to use that as well. You just basically daisy chain everything together, and you're going to be able to use those original light guns on any core that supports them. Play Point Blank, Playtime Crisis on the PlayStation 1 core with these adapters, and you sit in front of a 27-inch CRT. It's like you've been transported back to the arcades or to your living room in the 90s, enjoying everything you possibly can, and that is just awesome. But the best part is there's also the GunCon 2, which is probably the easiest way to get light guns into MiSTer FPGA on the analog side, because unlike the PlayStation 1 port, this just uses a USB controller port, which you obviously have a bunch of on MiSTer. Same concept, it does have that sync cable, and the nice thing about the GunCon 2 is that it has more buttons, 5 in total. That way you have more control over your MiSTer. The original GunCon only has 3, including the trigger. Here on the GunCon 2, you get an additional 2 buttons, which is very helpful when you are playing around with this sort of stuff in FPGA. But you get to use your light guns on a CRT, and that is great. But it's just stuff like this. Playing a cave bullet hell shmup, playing a Tate shooter, playing a Tate game on a CRT rotated with the scan lines going in the right direction is just a great look to be had. You can't beat this sort of thing. And again, I'm not saying you need a CRT to enjoy your MiSTer, but you should get one because it allows you to enjoy it in a completely different manner. Why not just have the best of both worlds? Have your nice 4K television with the HDMI going in and the TV finishing the scale. Maybe use a RetroTink 4K if you want to with direct video mode, but also keep a CRT television around because they have a certain look, feel, and vibe that is never going to be replicated. They have a sound, they have a smell, they have a warmth to them. It really is analog, and I know people talk about that all the time, but I grew up in this era. I grew up as a filmmaker shooting 16mm film before I went to digital. Analog versus digital is a real thing. Both of them are incredible, both of them look and feel different, and you should probably have both to enjoy the best of both worlds. Sure, that I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.